You are an endbringer. You are trying to destroy the world.
Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Tamnon's Torturous Time of Terror. On tonight's Spooky Spectacular, we will be journeying down the scariest story a trading card game fan can hear: the death of a game. On this tome of its subject, I will be opening items of a game from the ageless time before cell phones, the early 2000s. In 2005, a horror-themed trading card game was released by the often terrible at running games, but great at killing them, Wizards of the Coast. This game was called HECATOMB. There are a few great gameplay videos that could teach you to learn to play. However, this video will be more about my experiences with the game and how it failed, why it failed, my time playing it. The game only had 3 total sets and lasted from August 2005 to August 2006. Want to hear something scary about that? I was 14 years old. The perfect age to be a little Chunny Bouyo teen Hot Topic kid. And what's more Hot Topic than a 5-sided pentagram card game based around evil gods and alien abductions? The game focused around ending the world. You were a endbringer and played the game to reap souls. Think life points and magic or sort of like Lorcana that counted up. Anyway, with your horrific abominations reaping these souls, all the endbringers have the same goal: to end the world. Then you would hop to the apocalypse, to a new Earth in the multiverse, and start ending things all over again. In a weird way, the gameplay reflected this shared goal, and you could technically never attack your opponent, and the game would still end with 20 souls reaped and somebody ending the world and you guys going to the next one. A lot of the gameplay revolved around trying to gain or remove souls from a sort of shared pot in order to end the world faster. This made multiplayer very fun, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The game was designed by Mike Elliott and Jonathan Tweet mostly, both of whom have a ton of games under their belt they worked on or designed. Notably, for me at least, is that they worked on Dreamblade, which was another failed WotC game that deserved more time than it got, and Duel Masters, and they also worked with Ryan Miller on HECATOMB, who also worked in Duel Masters and later Lorcana. And Duel Masters is still a huge game in Japan, despite, once again, WotC killing it. On Huge in Japan, Mike is credited with designing Battle Spirits, which has been a top seller in Japan since its release in 2008. And I know it just got a reboot, but Battle Spirits is huge in Japan. Same with Duel Masters, kind of hard to understate how big they are. Both Mike and Jonathan also worked on a ton of different Magic the Gathering sets, which is very apparent in many aspects of HECATOMB. But let's get on to the focus. The game was dark. It was dark and brooding to an absurd degree, even disregarding the player lore. The game consisted of 4 factions called Dooms: corruption, deceit, destruction, and greed. And these can be summarized really simply. Take any 5-color TCG, add the black faction to each color, and just remove white. Corruption is the essential black color. Deceit was solidly blue control, destruction was red aggro, and green was green, even with resource gain and manipulation, although it did do some really interesting things since any card could become lands or mana or enter or whatever you want to call it. Literally, this was a bizarre world MTG where white was just never a color. Although you could argue some of the corruption doom effects could fit, and before some zombie crawls up from under the floorboards to let me know I'm wrong, this has been 20 years, and this is just kind of my personal memory about it when I played, and I was a teenager, so keep some of that in mind if you start going through cards and are like, well, you know, this actually fits in blue. While the game was active, there was a very fun Would I Rather test on their website that would tell you which faction's cult you would best fit in. I recall questions being, would you rather be slowly cooked in a boiling pot? Or would you rather be immortal but stuck in a casket with no hope of rescue? And similar. Cards were 5-sided, creating a pentagram, and came in packs of 13. Real edgy on purpose, highbrow stuff. The art had many prolific horror artists working with it, and the packs were labeled a strong like 15 plus or something, making it very, very clear it wasn't for children, as if the gore on the cards and a card literally named Moloch the Child Eater didn't really show that already. You would summon minions, which were your essential attack or defend units. What made the game interesting is these minions would stack on top of one another, or it was called stitching, like stitching Frankenstein together. This, in lore, would be your Endbringer, fusing these already horrific creatures together into an abomination. Stitching and stacking worked due to the game's pentagram-shaped nature, and kinda gave reason to the gimmick. Minions would get various effects depending on how they were stitched, and this made gameplay super unique pretty much every game. This also led to interesting mechanics, or unstitching, I kinda forget the mechanical name for it. Yours or your opponent's abominations for various reasons, like making a stronger one for yourself or stopping a super strong pile of an opponent. Sometimes these piles created combos practically on their own. And decks revolved around creating them with long form write-ups about how to make those said combo piles work. You also had fates, which were your one-time use effects a la sorceries, relics that stuck around and provided continuous cancerous effects, and last and most this is a hard word, sorry guys, the most blasphemous card type of all, gods. Yes, gods. The game was so edgy, they had a card type where you could only ever have one on your board, the god you were ending the world for. From horrific historical gods like Moloch the Child Eater. Yes, that was the actual name of the card, and based on the real-life pagan god of the same name people would burn babies to. And you also had obvious horror includes like Cthulhu, Hester, etc. These gods were very rare, something like, like 1 in every 3 boxes based on my openings, and generally were cards you could base your entire diabolical plan to end the world around. Anyone else remember the controversy around Yu-Gi-Oh being evil because of the 3 god cards? Yeah, now imagine if one was based on the real-life pagan god or like Satan or something. Now, that's controversial. It's not like some historical god's like a demonic entity that you're calling a god. Which makes sense, kind of, considering one of the designers is a literal fedora-tipping atheist who blogs about religion not being real to this very day. So a little bit of that edge definitely smothered and covered this 2000s game. The sets which I'm showing in this video came in 3 total. I mean, obviously I planned more, but 3 came out. The base set, which was only HECATOMB, and I suppose now would be a good time to mention what that means. HECATOMB is a burnt offering of 100 cattle to Greek gods. You can hear the distant metal bands playing when the designer settled on that name. The second set, which released in October after the first, was Last Hallows Eve, and clearly was designed with the October Halloween time in mind. And honestly, in another universe where the Endbringers didn't end the game, I imagine the October set would have become sort of a base set to return cards into the card pool that were popular, kind of like a fun nerdy TCG Halloween at the LGS, sort of maybe like a base set in Magic would be. Alas, the good guys saved the day, and there's only 3 sets, which is why I'm making this video now. And the third set, which is easily my favorite and the most difficult to get a hold of, as it was released pretty much as the game was announced to die or very shortly before, or something like that, was called Blanket of Lies. It was a set that really showcased where the HECATOMB TCG could go with theming. The entire set was based around alien abductions and horrific things outside time and space. It was to be the last set, as the alien invasion worked and the world where HECATOMB continued died. I remember really wanting to buy the game, but this was also at the point in which Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh were starting kind of another mini satanic panic. You would often see on TV how X school or church or parents group had banned Pokemon or Harry Potter or something another. So the HECATOMB cards were just difficult to find. Many card shops didn't want to hold on to them or promote them, as LGS were getting enough flack back then anyway. And many seemingly didn't want to show off or promote the game too much. Too much edge, too much gore, too many parents complaining. Even the one shop I recall buying packs at had them kind of hidden behind the counter and only really showed them when asked, stating they had received, complaints. Another reason was probably due to the most fun aspect of the cards, their 5 sides and plastic makeup. I love the cards for being plastic and literally breaking the mold of 4-side standard size. The only way to destroy these things was to honestly throw them in a microwave, and it took a good bit of force on concrete to scratch them. That was some strong plastic. In a way, this was perfect because the need for sleeves wasn't really there. And, well, to the extent as the plastic meant the cards sort of vacuum stuck to one another, so people did want sleeves, but they weren't super necessary. This odd shape and material really did put a lot of people off, though. I know I showed the deck box off earlier, but at first these were nowhere to be found, and honestly I didn't find them until years after the game had died from a wholesaler. This meant your normal deck boxes you already had from Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, etc. They just wouldn't hold the cards, and while people did find creative ways like rubber bands, rubber bands actually work on plastic, guys, don't really break them. Kind of thing outside that box like that is just too much for most people. And this also meant that the cards were expensive, because they're plastic, not cardboard. I don't remember the exact amount, but back then a pack of Pokemon or Magic was something like $2.50, while a pack of HECATOMB was like a staggering $4.99 or something. I remember it being almost double, and that is a big ask for anyone to get into a game, and even more so than an LGS would buy boxes to try to sell. The game was awkward to pack in store, expensive to buy into, and the somewhat really poor pull rates for needed cards like the gods, and honestly the spooky skeletons added to the mix, and well, the game was the Night of the Living Dead from the moment it was first stitched together. But there was a lot of fun stuff too. While I only made it once, being in the woods with skinwalkers growing up personally, they did have weekly play events where they gave out really cool pins for the Dooms, and kind of different sets and things, and reading the small community posts, it seems usually like small groups of horror fans playing. There are also a few dedicated players who, even after the game died, organized Gen Con and similar play events for Draft and Constructed. And I'm not really sure if that's still going on anymore, but it did go on pretty long after the game had died. I know for a fact because I remember looking into it around 2010 or something like that. The forums were very active, with many creepy mind games consisting of puzzles hidden on the forums and random web pages set up, I believe, by the designers. Those who figured out these esoteric puzzles were awarded as horsemen or something similar, it's been a while, goals, under their profile on the forums. I never got too into it, having a brick of the computer that barely loaded a single manga page after 20 minutes on a 56K modem, but it was always cool to read the crazy rabbit holes that people would journey down trying to solve the presented puzzles and gain this horseman title on the forums. In recent years, the game's sealed product secondary market has gone significantly up, probably as Gen X and fellow millennials look back on products they half remember and try to own it. The third set being the rarest, it's also the hardest to find and more expensive. However, if you're looking just for a few fun games, the starters are all cheap and they're randomized. This is great because you can pick up 2 starters and have 2 separate decks right off the bat. I'll say that every few years I'll do a draft with the game, as it's easy to teach people if they've ever played pretty much any of the games, like from Duel Masters or Magic, and it's always a blast. I guess now if you've played Lurkana, it plays similar to that as well, which again is funny because Ryan Miller worked on both. It makes for a great game where food and beverages are around, like a Halloween kickback per se, or horror movie night, thanks to the plastic cards making party fouls not so foul. Something weird to note is that the cards do stink of plastic that's been heated and aged. Probably because they are plastic that's been sitting in warehouses heated and aged. It's honestly awful. It's like going into a deep dark basement at the start of a horror film. Honestly pretty on brand. But again, the cards are plastic, so you can wash them. That's right, it is a washable TCG. Good, clean, evil fun for the whole family above 15. Now, if you are interested in diving deeper, there is a web archive of the original WotC-hosted HECATOMB start page you can find via Wikipedia that has some interesting stuff. I don't think you can still find the forums hosted anywhere from when they were yeeted, but that is where your Doom quiz somehow still works, and you can read all the lore and old transcripts with the designers, which is pretty cool. Getting all of that out of the way, its death was just one of many TCGs I've seen die since childhood. There have been an absurd amount of card games released since Magic took off, as it is a whole brand new way to play games. HECATOMB is just one in a long line, and it's time to get kind of speculative here. Every time a game ends, I can't help but think about where the game could have gone. Sometimes you get lucky and the game continues elsewhere, like Duel Masters. Even though WotC killed it on purpose twice in English, it's still alive and thriving in Japan. And you can see just how it's changed over the years and what avenues it's gone through. The game that had died in the West has gone on to influence an entire new generation of games, and pretty much any game with life cloth mechanics or any card as a resource probably has ties to Duel Masters somehow. Even now, Morrow, who works on Magic the Gathering, has stated that they take ideas from Duel Masters. Cards like Companion, Living Weapon, Double Face cards were all Duel Masters originals taken for use in the West for a different game. I can't help but wonder if Hecatomb's souls going up each turn helped to influence Lorcana later down the line, with Ryan Miller working on both and finding the gameplay interesting. Of course, that's in other games as well, but with Hecatomb, it's a bit more difficult, mostly because the cool stuff comes from the stacking of the cards. The only thing even sort of equivalent I can think of is the Digimon TCG evolving mechanic, where the cards maintain some abilities from the cards below, and there's certain other games like WeCross where the cards on top of certain other cards gain effects. And were these influenced by Hecatomb? Maybe, just like how, aliens maybe made the pyramids. We just don't know. But had it lived, Hecatomb could have gone all sorts of places. Seeing the Alien set, Blanket of Lies, if you look at the base and Last Hollow's Eve as starter sets, I can picture the sequels. Entire sets based on the Salem with covens and burning at the stake, labyrinths of ancient Greek filled with horrific minotaurs, a vampire versus werewolf set with a Twilight tie-in. I mean, I wonder how much Hecatomb later inspired other WotC employees with sets like Innistrad or Duskmourn. Looking at the recently announced Secret Lair X Horror, I can picture a Hecatomb timeline where mini sets based on upcoming or past popular horror movie releases are all over the place, or even its own low-budget live-action show a la American Horror Story but called Hecatomb and just soft promotion. With how big horror has been and continues to grow with horror cons out the wazoo, I went to 3 in one day last year, it really feels like Hecatomb was just a few years off from really having had a possibility for a long-standing game. Some official reasons the game gave for the dying was something about oil cost increase due to the wars in the Middle East, and I touched upon the cost of the game earlier, but I've also played enough games WotC has dropped the ball on to not trust that reasoning super hard. The game felt like it was just kind of ahead of its time, and if it released today, would probably do amazing on the horror circuit. The game ported itself to multiplayer super easily, and variants like EDH could have arisen very naturally, as I recall playing multiplayer Hecatomb in 2005, which was a couple years prior to the creation of EDH even in the fan-made, and multiplayer Hecatomb just worked really cool. And personally and obviously from this video, I feel strongly the game shouldn't have died, even if it makes perfect sense that it did. It was released in an awkward time for the content it had. It was expensive. It wasn't promoted very well. The game itself, outside of the stacking, wasn't drastically different from Magic. I mean, we did only have 3 sets, so I'm sure it would have completely diverged. And the game was weird. In a lot of ways, it makes sense, even if I wish it had lasted longer than it died. It's always a harrowing feeling to see a game you enjoy just eat the bucket. Sometimes games live on in a zombie mode with small outlets of players against all odds, kind of like Force of Will. Sometimes a company kills them for a new shinier version like Bandai with DBS. However, the moment they announce a game's death, you know that no new sets will come out. You don't get to see what interesting or cool future ideas the designers had in store. You know if you go to the LGS, no one will be there to play unless you bring all the decks yourself. And many times it feels like the games that pass are better than the ones that stay around. It's the scariest moment for a card game player, realizing that all the best moments of that card game's life are behind them. While over the many years and piles of cardboard laying in their caskets, and some plastic as well, I've gone through this time and time again, and never truly gets easier. The best bet is to make a bunch of decks and play them at your game nights or rope players at the LGS into them after hours. This can be a huge amount of fun and give life to your dead games, but obviously it's not the same. All things in life come and go, from card games to even you, listener. Happy Halloween. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more card game, anime, whatever content I like. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the video.